Riley Thorne stood at the edge of the observation deck, her breath fogging the reinforced glass. Below, the Veng Coalition Tactical Academy spread like a carved jewel amphitheaters etched into mountains, spires gleaming under a foreign sun. She'd earned her place here, one of only 12 humans among thousands of cadets from 17 species. It was meant to be an honor. It felt like a gilded cage. The morning briefing had been delivered by Overseer Kale, a Veng administrator whose carapace gleamed with the cold sheen of authority. His voice, a harmonic drone, had laid out the new compliance regulations. Human cadets were to submit all personal data slates for cognitive alignment scans. Their independent study periods were halved, and all tactical proposals required approval from a Veng supervisor. For your own integration, Kyle had stated, his mandibles not moving. Your species. Unstructured problem-solving requires guidance. Riley's call sign, Wraith, glowed softly on her uniform's holographic roster. She'd chosen it as a quiet joke. Now it felt like a warning. Around her, the academy hummed with ordered purpose clay cadets with crystalline appendages taking flawless notes. Boreth moving in silent paired synchrony. Humans were the outlier. The variable the Veng were determined to control. She watched a transport shuttle dock, delivering another batch of sanctioned educational modules. The Veng believed warfare was philosophy, a tragedy to be dissected. Humans saw it as a problem to be solved. That divergence wasn't just academic. It was a fault line. And Riley, feeling the weight of the unsmiling stares from passing Veng instructors, knew the ground was beginning to shake. Professor Thalenver's lecture on resource utilization was a masterpiece of Veng pedagogy, a holographic battlefield rotated above his palms, a dying planet of red and blue markers. The key is synthesis, his resonant voice echoed. Observation, analysis, then application. Riley sat motionless, her data slate dark. She'd seen the flaw in the scenario the moment it loaded. The fuel containers were upwind. The relay tower was a plasma pulse away from becoming a weapon. The lesson was about retreat. The solution was about turning the environment into a trap. When she spoke, it wasn't an interruption, but a clarification that cut the lecture's careful rhythm. The fuel containers are pressurized. Standard grade 4, hypergolic. Thalenver's mandibles flexed. Yes, but I have not yet reached. And the relay tower uses plasma-based amplification. Riley continued, her eyes tracking data overlays only she seemed to see. What's the wind speed in the canyon? The amphitheater fell silent. A Claith cadet swiveled all 7 optical sensors toward her. Later, in Overseer Kale's austere office, the silence was colder. Cadet Thorne, Kale stated, not looking up from his display. Your intervention demonstrated a concerning disregard for pedagogical structure. Professor Thalenver's curriculum is a 6th-century-old tradition. I used what was around me, Riley said, keeping her voice level. The lecture, the data, the terrain. Wasn't that the point? The point, Kale said, finally meeting her gaze, is to learn our way. Your accelerated, lateral conclusions disrupt the cohort's harmony. Your data slate privileges are revoked for 1 week. Use the time to contemplate the value of patience. He dismissed her with a gesture. As the door hissed shut, Riley felt the first spark of cold anger. It wasn't about being wrong. It was about being too right, too fast. And that, to the Veng, was the greatest offense. The pressure became a constant, subtle weight. Human cadets found their simulation times slotted during low-priority cycles. Their access to the tactical archives was filtered. Certain historical battle records, particularly human victories, deemed atypical, now required special clearance. Riley found an ally in an unexpected place. Kale's own aide, a Boreth named Wren. Boreth were slow-spoken, methodical, and valued truth above hierarchy. One evening, in the quiet of the archival sublevel, Ren's twin heads bent over a data terminal. "The filtration algorithm is new," Ren's left head said, voice a soft rumble. "It tags human cognitive pattern analyses as instability risks." His right head finished. "This is not regulation. It is fear." Ren showed her logs of diverted resources meant for human dormitories, reallocated to infrastructure stabilization. He showed her the unlisted observation tags on every human cadet's file. "They are not trying to teach you," Ren said simply. "They are trying to contain you." The breaking point came during a cross-species survival exercise. The scenario was a 5-day endurance test on a simulated glacier moon. The learning objective was resource management and patience. Riley's team, humans all, finished in 11 hours. They used thermal refraction from the ice to power signals, repurposed their packing materials into efficient shelters, and hunted simulated fauna with traps made from communication wiring. They spent the remaining time improving their camp board. The Vang observers were not amused. Overseer Kale cited conceptual violation of core learning principles and mandated psychological evaluations for the entire human cohort. "They don't see solutions," Riley muttered to Ren later, watching a transport leave with the evaluation team. "They only see disobedience." Ren's 4 hands moved in a slow, deliberate gesture of agreement. When a system defines order, anything outside it becomes chaos, even if it works. The summons was to the Strategic Assessment Committee chamber, a vaulted room designed to humble. Director Karn Set, a being who commanded fleets when humanity was mastering steam, presided. Overseer Kale stood to his right, presenting a list of formal complaints. 17 documented incidents of pedagogical disruption, Kale announced. 3 courses entirely restructured. They do not engage with the philosophical weight of warfare. They treat ethical dilemmas as engineering problems. Riley stood at the center of the floor, feeling the gaze of countless alien eyes. She had been brought here to answer for her asynchronous learning model, a curriculum revision she'd submitted as extra credit. Cadet Thorne, Director Set's voice was like stone grinding. Your proposal dismantles sequential learning. You assume students can integrate complex ideas immediately. This contradicts centuries of proven methodology. With respect, Director, Riley said, her voice clear in the vast space. It only contradicts methodology built for minds that think in straight lines. We think in networks. We see the whole board. The proof is in the performance metrics my model predicts a 30% increase in comprehension speed. Kale cut in. This arrogance is precisely the issue. You see our traditions as inefficiencies to be optimized. No, Riley said, meeting his gaze. I see students who could be better, faster, smarter. I see a galaxy of threats that won't wait for a 30-minute lecture on the philosophy of defeat. She took a breath, the spark in her chest blazing. You asked us to use what's around us. Your bureaucracy, your fear of change, your own rigid rules. They're around us too. What do you think we're learning to use? The silence was absolute. She had not just defended her idea. She had declared war on their entire system of control. In Kale's eyes, she saw not anger, but cold, final recognition. The line was crossed. Alone in her quarters, Riley accessed the encrypted data core Ren had risked everything to give her. It was a trove of internal Vang Coalition communications, procurement logs, and budgetary reports. She scrolled, her heart hammering against her ribs. There it was. The Vang Academy's funding was tied to a galactic accord, the Fair Integration Charter. One clause was explicit. No signatory species shall be subjected to educational restrictions based on cognitive dissimilarity, nor shall resources be disproportionately allocated to suppress unique adaptive methodologies. Chaos, alignment. Scans, the filtered archives, the diverted dormitory resources, they were all violations. The Vang weren't just being rigid. They were breaking interstellar law to maintain control. Riley reached out. Not to human cadets, that would be watched. She contacted the clay, whose crystalline society valued data integrity above all. She met with the Barth pair from her lecture, who shared a deep cultural aversion to deceit. She presented the evidence not as a human grievance, but as a corruption of shared principles. The accord is the foundation of the coalition. One clay cadet, whose name translated to ClearSpark, chimed softly. To violate it here, it suggests it may be violated elsewhere. A plan formed not of rebellion, but of revelation. They would use the Academy's own systems against it. The end-of-cycle grand review was coming alive. Galaxy-wide broadcast of cadet demonstrations before the full Coalition Council. Every species leadership would be watching. Kale grew suspicious. Human dormitories underwent equipment searches. Riley's data slate was confiscated again, but the core data was already scattered, hidden in fragments across a dozen alien cadets' personal study files, waiting to be assembled. The stage was set. The Veng had built a theater to showcase their orderly superiority. Riley intended to use it to expose the cracks in their foundation. The grand review was a spectacle of synchronized, tactical displays and philosophical dissertations on conflict. The holographic amphitheater was packed with dignitaries, their forms shimmering in the projection light. Overseer Kale stood proudly beside Director Set, narrating the harmonious progression of the Academy's teachings. Riley's team was last. Their simulation assignment was public knowledge, a hopeless last stand on a derelict station. The observers expected a graceful, philosophical acceptance of defeat. Instead, Riley, along with Apex and Cypher, performed the impossible. They fixed the lying sensors, used the reactor as bait, and broadcast a surrender that lured the simulated enemy flagship to its doom. They turned an unwinnable scenario into a devastating counterstrike in under 30 minutes. The broadcast feed showed the stunned silence of the Veng instructors, then cut quickly to applause. But before Kale could step forward for the closing remarks, Riley activated a secondary channel, a cadet's right to provide a post-exercise analysis to the council. Her face appeared on every screen, in every diplomatic chamber across the coalition. "Honored Council," she began, her voice steady. "We were taught to use what is around us. Today, we use this simulation. But for months, what has been around us is a systemic violation of the Fair Integration Charter." She began to lay out the evidence. The filtered archives, the diverted resources, Kale's own memos labeling human cognition a containment priority. The Veng delegation tried to cut the feed, but the Clay and Borth cadets had already patched their systems, locking it open. The evidence streamed: logs, memos, budgets, irrefutable and damning. Kale stood rigid, his ceremonial blades seeming to tremble on his hips. The orderly theater he had built was collapsing, and the humans hadn't stormed the stage. They had simply used the microphone he'd given them. Chaos rippled through the observation deck. Dignitaries from a dozen species were on their feet, communications buzzing. Director Set raised a hand, and the room stilled, his authority a palpable force. Overseer Kale turned to the council's projection, his harmonic voice strained. "This is a malicious distortion. A human failure to adapt, framed as persecution. Is it?" The voice came from Counselor Valen, a reptilian Trek who had long questioned Veng overreach. "The data streams are verified. The charter is clear." He fixed his gaze on Director Set. "Does the Academy stand by these actions?" All eyes turned to Director Set. He looked from Kale's rigid, defiant form to Riley, standing small but unyielding in the simulation chamber below. The weight of centuries of tradition hung in the balance. Then he did the unthinkable. He turned his back on Kale and addressed the council. "The Veng Coalition Tactical Academy," he said, each word deliberate, "exists to produce the galaxy's finest tactical minds. not to produce obedient echoes. He looked down at Riley. Cadet Thorne did not just solve a simulation. She diagnosed a critical flaw in our own system. She used the tools around her, our rules, our technology, our own principles, to reveal a truth we had blinded ourselves to. He turned to the stunned Kale. Overseer Kale, you are relieved. Your actions have weakened the coalition by seeking to stifle its greatest source of adaptive strength. Kale seemed to shrink, his carapace losing its luster. The victory wasn't explosive. It was judicial, definitive. The human hadn't fired a shot. She had wielded truth with the precision of a scalpel, and the Vin's own leader had followed the logic to its only just conclusion. Riley stood in the spotlight, her heart pounding not with triumph, but with a fierce, quiet vindication. They had tried to teach her to think in lines. She had shown them the power of the web. Reforms moved with surprising speed. The filtration algorithms were purged. Resource allocations were audited and corrected. A new pedagogical council was formed, with Riley Thorne, now a junior consultant, serving alongside Professor Thellenver. Thellenver himself had changed. In his office, overlooking the geometrically perfect gardens, he now kept a second data slate on his desk. Riley revised curriculum, its network map structure glowing softly. Lateral processing, he'd mused to her once, his mandibles clicking in amusement. We were teaching ladder climbing in a universe of webs. Riley walked the academy paths not as an outlier, but as a pioneer. Human cadets no longer had their study periods cut. They had new ones added, labeled adaptive synthesis workshops, often taught by humans. On the last day of the cycle, Director Set found her at the observation deck once more. The stars shone, indifferent and bright. You weaponized a lecture, Cadet Thorne, he said, not unkindly. Then you weaponized transparency, protocol, and our own laws. My people are uncomfortable. So are we sometimes, Riley replied, watching a human-designed shuttle leaner, more efficient dock below. But discomfort means we're moving. It means we're not stagnant. Set nodded slowly. A tactical reassessment, he said, using the old Vang term for admitting error. We will learn from you. And perhaps you will learn patience from us. Maybe, Riley smiled. But probably not the way you expect. She looked out at the stars, at the endless, beautiful, terrifying puzzle of the galaxy. They hadn't won by being stronger. They had won by seeing the connections others missed, by using the very constraints meant to bind them as leverage. The Vang had tried to teach humanity its place. Humanity had simply redesigned the classroom. The lecture notes were weaponized. The lesson, finally, was learned. Humans don't just endure the rules of the universe. They study them, learn them, and then find a way to turn them into tools. And in that relentless, adaptive will, there is no greater power.